Portland Salesforce Administrator User Group. Today we have a presentation from Andrew Shanks with the Oregon Humane Society, and he's going to be sharing with us how his company, how the Oregon Humane Society leverages MuleSoft in their day-to-day operations. I am Michael Montez, and my co-leader Allison Rouse is on another call, unfortunately, but she may be joining us later. But we co-lead the Portland, Oregon Administrator Salesforce User Group. So if you have any questions or comments, or you'd like to present to this group, to the group, please reach out to one of us at any time, and we'll be happy to figure something out on how we can make that happen. Speaking of upcoming meetings, we've got Forcelandia next month, the 10th and the 11th. So tickets are available, and that's it's a Salesforce local community event hosted by the developer user group. But obviously, we want to share that information with everybody. So you can go to forcelandia.com, get your tickets for the 2-day event. And then the week in July, we have another presentation from Dan Donan with, I think he's with Square or something, but he's going to be sharing with us about platform events. So join us for that. And then between now and the 10th, I'm going to see if we can't have another meeting. I just need to find a topic that makes sense for all of us. So that will be what we have hopeful, these upcoming events as well. And of course, the user groups always reach out to each other as well. And don't forget to share and be social. All right, so let's get us over to Andrew, who again, with the Oregon Humane Society, and he is the Salesforce administrator. He will take questions during and after the presentation, so please feel free to leverage the chat. And I believe if you want to pop in and ask a question, you can raise your hand or just, interrupt. So with that, let me stop sharing and hand over to Andrew.
Awesome. Let me share my screen. Great. Yeah, so excited to be talking to you guys. Presented a few times for this group, and I'm also the co-leader for the Salesforce nonprofit user group in Portland. So I see a few other familiar faces from that group. Like Michael said, I'm the Salesforce admin at the Oregon Humane Society. I've been there for just about 2 years. An outdated slide is I am now become MuleSoft ambassador, which is pretty cool. I guess I'm still in probationary period, but new to the game. Been lots of fun. Oh, nice. See some other furry friends in the video. Love that. Yeah, I have spoken at Dreamforce, and there's just the QR code for my LinkedIn if you have any questions or want follow-up. I'm speaking at Forcelandia this year, as well as I did last year. So it's always a fun conference. I would highly recommend it if you're able to attend. How slides work. All right. So there's 3 use cases I'm going to kind of go over today that the Oregon Humane Society has used MuleSoft Composer specifically for. Firstly, I guess there's 3 or 4 different types of MuleSoft currently. So there's the Anypoint platform, which is kind of their API manager. So if you need to create a custom API that basically internal or external folks can call to, and then you take data and populate it and send it back to them. So if you want to manage or structure your own API, MuleSoft Anypoint is the way to go for that. There's MuleSoft RPA, which is robotic processing automation. So that is when you use like a virtual computer, you train it to do very specific things in a repetitive manner. So if things are very consistent all the time, nothing really changes and you're just doing the same process over and over and over again. Especially with external systems, perhaps even legacy systems that you don't have an API for, you can set up the RPA bot to basically log into these things for you, go to the specific pages based on how you structure it, and pull the data for you if you need it. we were thinking about using that for one of these situations, but fortunately we were able to use the API instead. There's the new product of intelligent document processing, so IDP. That is part of RPA. So it's part of the robotic processing automation, where you basically take either forms that have been filled out online, either manually or typed in, or however you do it, and they can be scanned and basically have that data populated and put wherever you need it. As a new feature, I haven't really had the chance to mess around with it because I am also still on paternity leave technically. So I don't have much time to do a lot of work here and there. And then the last one, the one I use most of the time, pretty much all the time, is MuleSoft Composer. You could compare it to like a Zapier or Zapier, however you pronounce that, or Boomi is another kind of similar product. So there's a lot of like automatic connections, you know, to NetSuite, Salesforce, Tableau, Slack, Google Sheets, Google Email, a bunch of other ones. But I primarily use it for the HTTP callouts or connector. So it's similar to what's now available in Salesforce, but I just typically like the UI and the functionality better in MuleSoft currently. So that's what I've been accustomed to using. So that is kind of what we will cover and talk about today. So the first process is foster brings backs. So basically we have a lot of animals. We can't keep them all in the shelter. So we will put them out to our lovely foster volunteers that will house the animals for a certain period of time. And when it is time to bring them back, they would fill out this form online. So it used to be manual, that basically they would fill out the form. We would have to go into WordPress and then either email or call kind of back and forth in order to coordinate a time. But now that it's 100% automated using WordPress, MuleSoft, Salesforce, and Sumo Scheduler. So that's a third-party platform that we've used to kind of help automate scheduling. You'll see that pop up in some other items as well today. So this is kind of an example of what our form would look like. Obviously, it's a lot better on our website, but it's behind a password protection. So you're going to fill out the dog's name, you know, their animal ID, and all kind of a few required fields, but really not that many. Just saying, you know, you're going to bring them back. Have they been good around kids, other dogs, cats, and then put in your name, email, and phone number. And then what ends up happening is basically through this process every hour, because it's not necessarily an immediate process that's needed, but every hour we connect to Gravity Forms, which is the forms part of WordPress. And I know there is kind of a stock connector. I never really played too much with that, just because I like the control and the ability to configure fields as I need to in MuleSoft Composer. So that's kind of how I went. So I'm doing a GET request to my specific form to get all of the entries. And I am doing this fun API jig where basically I'm saying I want to get only forms that were created after my previous run. So whenever a system run happens, it shows you the current timestamp and it shows you the previous timestamp, which was an hour ago for the last time it ran. So I can use that previous timestamp to say, okay, if it is greater than my previous timestamp, I want that form. Just set the request to be 100, just so that way I don't miss any. And then they have these for each loops. So basically for every entry that I get, assuming there's more than one, you know, I loop through each one. I try to find the contact record based on email, first name, last name. And then if I find somebody, then I have to loop. And this is one of the kind of weird oddities is even if it's a single record, you still need to go through a for loop or for each loop, just in case there happen to bring back more than one. You can kind of skirt around this now allows you to just say, I only want the first record or only one record. But if it doesn't find a record, it breaks, which isn't great. So doing the for each loop will kind of either find data or not, but at least it doesn't break. So even if it's only one record, it'll still run through only once and not multiple times. So once I find the contact, I try to find the animal based on the animal ID, which is a unique ID in Salesforce. And then same thing, if that is not empty, then I loop through my animals, even though it's only one because it's a unique ID. And I create a web form record. So it's a custom object with our animal, the person that submitted the form, and then additional information that I need or want in order to populate all of this in Salesforce. I'm hard coding the record ID type. I think this is for dog. I have dog, cat, and other are my 3 types. And then the type of form being a foster bring back actually triggers automation. So this is an example of a filled out form for myself. I have the age, the foster pet ID number. So that's the AID, all the information. And then when the type of form is a foster bring back, that triggers automation, which says basically when, and mind you, I tend to always use formulas for my flow entry conditions. The reason being is I have custom metadata that is an on-off switch. So I can't do this in the normal kind of entry conditions. You can't get the setup metadata. So if my on switch is on, which primarily pretty much always is, the record stage is canine foster bring back, the type of form is foster bring back, and the type of animal is dog. Then once that is all matched, I go through and I get all of my Sumo scheduler information. So I get the invites, I get the appointment type, or sorry, create the invites based on that record. And then I update it with the URL. So we have a clickable link that people would go to. So I have to create it and then update it right away in order to create that URL field. And you'll see I'm using like the now show you. So I created this variable. That is, there it is. That is not it. Oh, never mind, sorry. It basically gets created because it is an ID. So I just update it with the ID from the create records. So the link is created and then we have to set like invites. So this is the contact and we have a room that we assign the person to. And then we add that to a collection in order to create the invites individually. And then I have 2 subflows. One that is to send out an email invite. And then it comes back and sends a text invite via Twilio. So that is kind of how we automated our adoption process. Obviously, this is slightly outdated because I would want to have fault conditions on all of these pink elements and these actions as well. Actually, I think these do have fault paths within them that would kind of carry on. So that way this would never fail. But that is that. And the one thing, oh yeah, okay. So all of my Sumo appointments I put into metadata. So this is another custom metadata piece. The reason being is that there are like 7 to 9 different records that I would have to use a get records for in order to get the individual IDs for them. So instead of doing that, which would slow down the process and potentially break it if I'm doing too many records at once, I created them all as metadata. So I have this one as my K9 foster bring back. I have the invite link ID, the appointment type, how long it is, the host, which is the room, our process for it, our skill and service. And these are all Sumo specific items that I needed. So the color and email template ID, location ID, all these IDs are Sumo records for different objects that need to be part of the email and the appointment before it gets sent out. So rather than having, 8 or so different get records, I put it all in custom metadata to where, it is hard coded, which, is not necessarily ideal, but it is better than having 8 different get records. And these records don't ever change because the services don't change. So I'm not worried about the process getting deleted or the skill/service getting deleted. They're never really touched once they are set in place. So that's kind of the first example. Any questions on that process so far?
Andrew, a quick question on, not necessarily on the process, but just kind of the overall, like how long did it take for you to kind of, not, exact numbers, but, to come up with this solution, like in a theoretical format? And then how did you land on MuleSoft as the solution for that?
So we decided on MuleSoft primarily because it had a strong Salesforce connection, but also I ran into issues when I was trying to do some of these things with Zapier, to where if it had like an if else, it looked like in Zapier that basically the if would run, but there wasn't a way to say, oh, if this doesn't exist, do this other thing or continue. It would just kind of be an A or B and then it would stop. So it appeared to me that I would have to create like 2 automations that did the same thing, but one would be the A outcome and one would be the B outcome. So that was one reason that I picked MuleSoft. And I was also doing exactly what they tell you not to do at the start of every presentation, which is to make your buying decisions on the current available product. Since MuleSoft was recently purchased by Salesforce, I was kind of banking on some continued improvements and continued enhancements, which happened all relatively at the exact time that I needed them, fortunately. So it is great how that worked out. Sorry, kind of missed your question. I realized my headphones died partway through, so I might have missed the first part of your question.
No, that's fine. That was good. We'll do follow-up questions as well at the end. Thank you.
Great. So John is saying how MuleSoft and Zapier look pretty similar, which they are, I would say. Again, I kind of picked MuleSoft specifically for its Salesforce connection and banking on, let's say, future improvements. But the primary reason being in Zapier, when you get to kind of a branch point, I couldn't figure out a way to say, okay, well, if this happens, do this thing, but if not, then do this thing, and continue on kind of down the list. So it only looked like it allowed me to do one like if else and not multiple if else's within loops, which is needed kind of in the next process that I will show you guys. So there is nonprofit discounts from MuleSoft and Sumo. I unfortunately don't know what those are. That is above my pay grade, I guess. I'm not signing those contracts, but there is a discount on those, which is helpful. Okay, so one of the things we're looking to do, obviously, as most nonprofits are, is trying to kind of increase our donor base. So we opened up, obviously we didn't open up the hospital to increase our donor base because, we're taking a loss at this hospital, but we basically opened a community hospital for animals. So you're able to come, kind of pay what you can or get, financial assistance if you need it. We use a software there called EasyVet, which is spelled weird, but I guess easy, the correct spelling. Vet was already taken. So tech companies being tech companies spell things weird. So I used, again, MuleSoft and Salesforce and a custom object in order to make this connection. We're adding an additional like 2,000 potential donors per month that are visiting our veterinary services. And this one is a bit more complex due to EasyVet's API structure. So I'll start by going through this fun little chart. This is basically what I wrote out as a way to visualize what's happening. But first I will get EasyVet contacts, and then this is a checkbox field. Basically, it says get EasyVet contacts. It is, no, I don't have that up, but be here. So I have this custom object called URL fields, which is where I stash a bunch of things like this EasyVet token, which is totally expired because it isn't connected on this org. A bunch of custom fields where I set up like a URI, because that's the way that EasyVet requires you to send a timestamp. So my timestamp being this part, and all this other stuff is just, to me, gibberish that I use the website to help convert text to URI in order to say, again, I want things that are created greater than this time. And that time being a timestamp from 4 p.m. yesterday. And then I have my get EasyVet contacts, get animals, get appointments, get invoices, and get tags. So it runs in a very specific order. So I will get my contacts. I will then make a API call out to EasyVet to get all of the contacts. I loop through the contacts by first checking the contact details. So this is where EasyVet's annoying, is that the contact is just the name and the ID. And then I have to make a separate call out to get the contact details, which is email and phone number. So it's something I have to loop through to get both of those. And sometimes it's blank. And then to get the address is a third API call. And so I have to go through every single contact I get, looking for email and phone number, looking for address, trying to match them, and then if not matching them, creating them. So it's a very kind of odd, but it works out in the connection that I have with MuleSoft, because I'm able to do a lot of those if-else loops inside of loops. But it's basically 3 loops all happening kind of at once per every contact. So I first check to see the contact if it has the @ symbol for the contact details. If that is not empty, then I loop the contact details. And then I look for the contact with the first name, last name, and email match, because the contact detail record I has the @ symbol. Then I loop through the list of contacts. If the contact's not empty, so I found somebody, I update the contact with the EasyVet ID. If I did not find anybody, I create a contact, and then I get the contact details a second time. So now I have both the phone number and email, and I loop through those details to say, hey, if it has an @ symbol, then I'm sorry, if it does not have an @ symbol, then I carry on because that's the phone number. If it has the @ symbol, I just update the email and then go back. And if it does not have the @ symbol, then I do that third API call to get the address, which again, there might be more than one. So I loop through the address, see if it's empty or not, and then update the contact phone number and address, because this is my phone number path. And then if it is no address, then I just update the phone, and then I go all the way back to the top for my next contact. So it looks a little bit crazy on there, but it works out pretty well. It starts out by checking this field. So I have a scheduler that runs at 4 o'clock every day, and it just checks that get EasyVet contacts field. And that fires off this automation. It fires this automation that will then get all of my, I forgot. I turn off my on-off switch during this process. So I have a special user that I use for this process, an integration user that I turn the automation off. The reason being, we use NPSP, and with that, I was getting contact errors because I was trying to update contacts the same time that the NPSP system was. So in order to stop that, I turn off my automation settings so that way a lot of the NPSP default functionality doesn't happen. So I have multiple if statements. And the interesting thing here is I have to do these in order based on how we structure data. So I get our contacts first because I have to have a contact to associate an animal to. So I get animal second, and then I need both a contact and an animal in order to do appointments and invoices. So it's kind of a junction object where I need a required contact and required animal to create these two. Without them, I don't create them because the system would fail. And then EasyVet tags is just something that got added on at the end. So I put it at the end, but it's specific to contacts. And what ends up happening, I thought I had a picture of this. Oh, yeah. So this flow is very interesting, at least to me, because it basically volleys back and forth between Salesforce and MuleSoft. So the Salesforce process kicks off by checking that box that says get EasyVet contacts is true. And then when that happens, it fires MuleSoft to do the get contacts is true part. At the end of getting all my contacts, I update the Salesforce record to uncheck get contacts, and I have it check and mark get EasyVet animals is true, which then refires the MuleSoft process to step 2, which is getting all my animals. And then at the end of getting all my animals, I kick it back to Salesforce to mark that it is false, and then get appointments is true, back to MuleSoft to get appointments, tell Salesforce now I want invoices, get all my invoices, now tell Salesforce I want all my tags, which then I get all my tags in MuleSoft. So it's interesting because I needed the data in a very structured way. So that way I wasn't trying to create contacts, create appointments, create animals all at the same time. Like I need to get all my contacts. Once all my contacts are done, and that process can take roughly 10 minutes because it kind of self-regulates so I don't hit any errors, which is also really cool. Once I get all my contacts, then I can get animals. And then once I get all my animals, then I can do appointments, but I don't want one starting before the other finishes because it would just error out and not create all the records that I need. So that is why I kind of create the process this way. Yeah, that is a lot, I know. And this is probably one of the more kind of complex setups that I've done. But it ends up creating all of these appointments. It creates, invoices, tags, all of the kind of data that I need in the order that I need it at the time of day that I need it. Do you have any questions on that one? I know it's a bit in the weeds, but yeah, go ahead.
I got one. Actually two. So if I'm following you here, you're updating your Salesforce contact record with the EasyVet ID as your kind of way of preventing duplicates.
Yep.
What kind of confidence do you have in the EasyVet information that they don't have multiple contacts, or are you doing any kind of deduplication down the road if you actually inherit 2 different IDs for the same person?
So we typically don't have 2 IDs for the same person, but sometimes we'll have the same person twice with 2 different IDs.
That's what I meant. Yeah. So that does happen.
Yeah. So typically when that happens, like our data services team has a pretty good notification system for that with dupe deblocker,
okay,
which is a validity tool, I believe. So they'll get kind of notified if anything flags, and then they'll reach out to our EasyVet team to say, hey, I have this one contact that looks like the same person, but 2 different IDs. And then we default to keeping the oldest ID, which is the lowest number. So we'll delete the we'll delete the higher number, which is the newer contact.
Got it. The second question I had was more of a business process one. I'm curious about you pulling in the invoices. Are you using Salesforce to do invoicing, or is that just so you have kind of a history of how much they're spending?
Yeah, it's just a spending history.
Okay.
Yeah. We're not sending out invoices or collecting billing through Salesforce. All that's handled in EasyVet.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. I was trying to think if there's anything else interesting on that one, but yeah, the following back and forth is kind of what I really like. Yeah, this one took a while to set up because it was also the first time I'd used MuleSoft Composer. So I would kind of like do a little bit, take a break for a week or two, and kind of come back to it because it wasn't, let's say, a hard deadline. But got a lot of help with the MuleSoft community on Trailblazer community groups. Helped out a lot to help orchestrate this and get everything kind of in the way that I needed it, so it worked. All right, and the last one. So adoption meet and greets. This unfortunately has changed again. I think like a week or two, we went back to walk-in appointments only, just because while the scheduling here was great, it ended up being, if someone, said, hey, I want to adopt this dog, we send an invite, they schedule for tomorrow instead of today. And then if they have to cancel or reschedule, then that kind of just kicks the can down the road another day, which isn't great. Obviously, we want to find the dogs their forever homes as soon as possible because we do have limited space in our shelter. So we set up this process initially before we went back to in-person adoptions because the team was sending out invites 3 times a day and doing it all manually. So basically, you're taking 3+ hours a day. I calculated it more at like 6 to 8 hours a day, where you would pull anywhere between like 15 and 50 names. And for every single person, you're sending an email in Outlook. So copying and pasting some information into a template. And then you're going through a text editor or a text, I think it was called Simple Text, to send out a text message to this person with an invite after going to Simple IO or Short IO in order to create a link that expires in 4 hours. All this manually, repeat it up to 100 times a day, and we were able to kind of reduce it to just 15 minutes per day, so about 5 minutes per upload, by using NPSP data loader and Sumo scheduler and kind of custom automations and flows. So I'll kind of go in and show you what that looks like. So this is our old process. Oh, yeah, it's a new one. Do I have the old one? Okay. Here's the old one. So basically, someone submits a request online. Our customer care team receives the adopter details. We verify it. We create a link. So we verify in Shelter Buddy, which is just to check if they have a do not adopt flag or anything else that we need. We then create an expiring link at Short.io. We send an email template in Outlook and text message through simple texting. And then, we do all of our paperwork in Shelter Buddy, do medical forms through EasyVet, update our NetSuite Swiss systems, and then finalize the adoption in Shelter Buddy. But try repeating this, 100 times a day, see how long it takes you. It's not very efficient and took pretty much an entire full-time position to do this every day. We added MuleSoft for our kind of automation layer here. So now a person would submit a request online. I use MuleSoft to go in and get the request every 15 minutes. So that way it's happening pretty rapidly. I create an adoption record in Salesforce with that. I check the adoption status. So MuleSoft has invocable actions that came out at Dreamforce last year. And basically it calls out to Shelter Buddy to find that contact and say, hey, do we have a red flag of do not adopt or anything else that we would not want to send an invite out to this person. If they, clear it and there's no other people in line for that animal, then we send out an invite via email and text using Sumo Scheduler and Twilio. They schedule themselves, which is great. So we don't have any intervention there, and then they come and meet the animal. We update the adoption status in Salesforce, which then pushes back to Shelter Buddy, and then they're able to leave with that animal fairly quickly. So how it looks is on our website. If you, find an animal you want to adopt, click into it, and then, you fill out our Meet Me form. Basically, I will say here, MuleSoft Composer, schedule every 15 minutes again. And then I have the same kind of WordPress integration where I'm getting my MuleSoft Composer record from Salesforce. So that is, again, this, because there is a Shelter Buddy token, which is hidden on this page, that I need in order for kind of our callouts. And so this is an example of where I know this record exists. I'm only getting the first record. I'm not, looping through it. Once I get that record, I go to Gravity Forms. I get my form entries, search for, again, anything created in the last 15 minutes. And then I will start looping through them. I start error handling here, which is a great thing. So previously, if I hit a single error at anywhere in this process, the entire process stops. So, if it fails on record 5 of 37, I don't get those other 32 records. It just stops. So this allows the process to keep running. And then I can either send myself an email. I can choose to stop if I want to. But then it allows me to go back and, pull the data a different way if I need to. So I look for my contact the same way, first name, last name, email. And then if they exist, then what is this one? Oh, I see if they have a Shelter Buddy ID. So if they're in our system as having a Shelter Buddy ID already, if yes, then I get that person. And again, I have this process where the token expires every 2 hours. So I have scheduled flows that run every 2 hours that basically go and get me a brand new token. So that way this process never fails, instead of getting a new token every time I start the process. I just want my one record, and then pull their first name, last name, email is the match. And then basically, if they exist, I update their do not adopt status and Shelter Buddy ID if I need to. So that way I have kind of their up-to-date information. If I can't find them, then I create the person in Shelter Buddy and then update Salesforce with that Shelter Buddy ID that gets created once I create the contact in Shelter Buddy. And then else, false, fails, same thing, kind of create that person and then get that information in. Yeah, and same thing, looking for the animal and then creating the new adoption record. Or sorry, if I don't find it, I create the animal. And then at the end, I create the adoption record now that I have the contact in the animal. And then fill out a bunch of the information that we requested. And then default status is in the queue. And so how this looks in practice is not too crazy, but we got a little bit of stuff going on in here. Basically, I start by getting that same record in Salesforce. So I'm getting my MuleSoft URL field. That way I get the token that I need basically for all these API callouts. I check to see if this new adoption record, so this is running only when an adoption record is created, to send out an appointment invite for the first schedule. So I see if they have a contact ID. Yes, if they have a Shelter Buddy ID, I do that invocable action where I am using MuleSoft Composer just to get their DNA's do not adopt status. And then basically if they say do not adopt is true, I update the contact, and then I update the adoption record to say their status is do not adopt. So that way we won't send them an invite. If it's either blank or it's false, if it's false, I update the record. If it's blank, I just leave it as such and kind of move on to the next part. And then same thing, if there's no shelter buddy ID, I do a different call out in order to get the shelter buddy ID and like search for them. I have a decision if the response is not blank and it is true, meaning they do not adopt, it's the same setup there. And then if the response is not blank and false, so they're allowed to adopt, I do that here. And then I start the adoption request process. So I will get all adoption records for that animal just to see if there are any others that exist. And then I count that number of records. If it is more than one, I set a queue place. So basically like you are 5th in line or you are 4th in line by just doing a formula of the number of adoption records plus 1. And then if it is only 1 record, then I update the status to invite set, which then fires off automation to send them an invite to come and meet the animal. If it's 0 or none of the above, which would be kind of an error, then I just have it end the flow and not update the status because it will just be in queue. So it's not anything too dire. I think, so that is how we kind of streamlined the adoption process before we switch back to doing it in person. So that also saved us a lot of time and probably $100,000 in like people hours. So I know there's always like a price tag with obviously technology like MuleSoft. It's not cheap, let's say, but based on how much time we've saved with manual functionality and having to manually do pretty much everything for the adoption process, by making that automated, we've saved 1 to 2 headcount, on an annual basis by automating that. So we haven't had to backfill as much, which has been great. But yeah, that is, we'll pretty much wrap it up. Leave some time for questions if anyone has any.
Yeah, questions from anyone? I've got a few, but I want to monopolize. All right, roll the dice. Monopoly hotels. I wanted to ask Andrew, I wanted to kind of get a feel for your learning curve, kind of to learn and kind of get involved with MuleSoft. How would you say it's easy? Not easy, but less difficult, more difficult? There's a lot of dedicated time to learning it, or how did you kind of come about falling upon leveraging MuleSoft, and how easy was it to learn?
I was fortunate that like 2 jobs ago, I was exposed to kind of helping troubleshoot people's APIs. So I have a little bit of experience of like, okay, I can kind of piece together, figure out how to connect an API or add filters if I need to, with like an hour or 2, I guess. So that's been super helpful, especially with using the HTTP connector in MuleSoft Composer. If you don't have as much experience with APIs, that connector part might be a little more challenging. But they, like I said, they do have a bunch of default connections like NetSuite, Salesforce, Google, that you don't need to know any of that. You just kind of sign in and it's auto-connected. And I have used Zapier in the past. So having that experience of kind of like the if-else logic and, making triggers based on if this happens, do this other thing has helped. That increased or sped up my adoption time for sure. So I guess it just depends what functionality you want to do or are trying to accomplish and your past experience with it.
And then did you find it difficult to find business need use cases that made sense with MuleSoft, or do you now like take every business use case as a potential MuleSoft solution, or is it problem statement that becomes a MuleSoft solution, or is it still I'm going to do this over here, and then oh, look, I've run into this thing. I can now leverage this. I don't know if that's a good question or not, but
we primarily got it because we were starting to work on our like 360-degree view. So we had all these like data silos, and we wanted to bring in the data into Salesforce, not all of it, but obviously specific parts of it, because the systems alone are great at what they do. And we have different teams that are like staying in those silos because that's, their shelter information or their, veterinary care information, all that is very niche. So they need to stay in those silos kind of, but we wanted on the like fundraising side and marketing side to get better insight on what's going on. And so we chose MuleSoft Composer for like that HTTP component side of it. I would love to get my hands on like connecting it with NetSuite, which is one of its like, I think, primary use cases. But every time I kind of approach that, they're like, oh, not right now. We'll figure it out later. So one of these days, we'll get going on that one.
It sort of seems like beyond just the obvious capability of helping with integrations. I mean, like a lot of our integrations have the standard out of the box connections with Salesforce, but oftentimes like they have limitations. Like it would sure be nice if I could make this integration push or pull data in this way. I mean, that's the obvious use case, but it seems like anytime then you have some sort of use case where you want to use any of that integrated data, it seems like once you have MuleSoft connected, you'd be like, I'm going to use MuleSoft for everything because it's almost like flow on steroids, it seems like.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, and like I've said, I've connected Salesforce flows with MuleSoft Composer, and like they work great together. One thing can fire off the other and update the other. So, with that easy vet connection, just kind of going back and forth. And all of those platforms like Shelter Buddy, WordPress did have a automatic connection. I just chose not to use it again because of limitations. Like EasyVet, Gravity Forms, Shelter Buddy, all those are really like uncommon integrations unless you're in our like market. And so it's been funny, like now that I have it connected, talking with other platforms and other companies that are trying to do the same thing. And it's just been super helpful for us to have kind of that data insight. But it was a lot of, banging my head against the wall initially because they are unique and kind of weird integrations. So they don't behave, like a Jira integration or like a NetSuite integration. So trying to even just get the token or like the connection to work is usually the biggest headache. And then once I got that functioning, then I was fine. For Peter's question about price, I don't know. I signed up in like 2022. Let me see. And we did the automation. So technically it comes with Composer. We have Anypoint Platform. We have RPA. And I think we had to have IDA currently, or IDP, sorry. We did it that way because I wasn't sure how to. I thought we were going to use RPA.
What is RPA?
But it actually, the robotic process automation. I thought I was going to have to use that for Shelter Buddy until we updated the API and used not our servers, but used their version 2 API. It cost, I think, $57K was the sticker cost for the automation package. And that was like 57,000 credits, which basically 100 Composer actions equals 1 credit or something. So it gives us like up to like 5 million Composer transactions like a year, if that's all we used, which we are like at 10% of, maybe 15%. So we're not even close, but it worked out well because I needed the Anypoint platform in order to get the Shelter Buddy token to work, because Shelter Buddy, again, is weird. When I asked for a token, they just pass back a string, but it's not attached to a variable. Like usually you would see token, colon, and then in quotes, this giant string. It just sent the giant string with nothing else. So like Salesforce or MuleSoft couldn't digest it. So I used the Anypoint platform to basically get that and then manipulate it to have a token or a variable in front of it, so then I could actually pass it to Salesforce and have it work. But it doesn't look like they have pricing listed anymore. It's now on a contact us page.
All right. Any other inquiries? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. But thank you, Andrew, for sharing. And this is one of the more insightful MuleSoft examples I've seen. I've seen them; they're always very complicated, and I get a little glossy-eyed. But this was, I mean, these are really real world and very helpful. So I appreciate it. You sharing with us all today. So thank you.
Yeah, happy to help, and yeah, follow up if you guys have any questions. Totally happy to help answer them or point you in the right direction if I don't know the answer.
And good luck on your MuleSoft ambassadorship. I hope that you are knighted properly with the proper method, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording and wrap it up and say thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time that we are all gathered around. So thank you all very much, and have a great afternoon. Great day.